Good afternoon students, welcome back. In this fourth video, we are going to continue with chapter 2 of Indian economic development, that is Indian economy 1950 to 1990. So, we are going to talk about agriculture sector today. We are already aware of the features of agriculture sector at the time of independence. We know that the land tenure system was characterized by intermediaries. Jamidars were there who used to merely collect revenue or lagan from the farmers and give it to the British government. The agriculture in India was out of date, there was extremely low productivity, there was stagnation, negligible use of fertilizer was there, no modern technology was being used, and due to poor agricultural techniques, farmers were dependent largely on rainfall. So, to bring about improvement in the agriculture sector, a two-pronged strategy was adopted. First, land reforms and green revolution. Now, this land reforms, which basically emphasized on betterment of institutional structure, it remained in focus for the first 3 5-year plans. So, you should notice children, when we talk about betterment of institutional structure, basically it referred to bringing about change in the ownership of land holdings, for example making the the actual tiller the owner of land. So, bringing about these changes, it was thought that agriculture will improve, but no direct efforts to increase the production or productivity were made. The second approach which we talk about, that was actually a major shift in strategy which took place in mid 1960s, was the adoption of new agricultural strategy, wherein we are going to talk about green revolution. This new agricultural strategy mainly emphasized the adoption of new and improved inputs and technology. Now, let's talk about land reforms first. When we're talking about land reform, children, it refers to change in the ownership of land holdings. It's also known as agrarian reform because it was brought about in agriculture sector. So, it involves a changing of laws, regulations or customs regarding land ownership. Who is going to be the owner of the land, and abolition of jamidari system, all these things were brought about. So, let us throw some light on the type of land reforms which were introduced. But before that, let's just have a look at importance of land reforms. Why we had to introduce land reforms? First of all, it was important that farmers are protected from jamidars or from the intermediaries, because they used to exploit the poor farmer, and to bring about improvement in the socio-economic condition of rural poor. Since you already know, majority of the Indian population was residing in rural areas and they were deriving their livelihood directly from agriculture sector, and it was very important if we wanted to bring about improvement in their socio and economic conditions. So, land reforms had to be introduced so that they will be able to increase their income, increase their earning, and improve their standard of living also. It was also important for promotion of incentives, because there was one of the land reforms which was introduced, which we are going to shortly talk about, is making the tiller the owner of land. And that was done so that the actual tiller who is cultivating the land, but he is not in possession of that land, he should be motivated to bring about improvement in productivity of the land that he is cultivating. For establishing link between government and farmers, yes, because if we'll abolish jamidars or intermediaries, then in a way we'll bring government and farmers in direct contact with each other. Planned growth, because we had adopted planning, so it was important that for the planned growth, that agriculture sector was made to see these changes so that farmers' conditions can improve. Another thing is for social justice, because when you're talking about that, inequalities in income distribution were also widespread. On one hand, we had jamidars, on one hand, we had big landowners who were in possession of large pieces of land. But on the other hand, we had majority of farmers who were landless and who were poor, who were working as sharecroppers. So, for social justice, it was important a change in the ownership pattern of land was brought about so that those who are not in possession of land they should also be able to get that and they will also be earn their livelihood. So now we're talking about the types of land reforms. The first one was abolition of intermediaries. And it means that jamidars, they had been abolished and ownership rights had been directly conferred upon those who actually cultivate the land. So they were in direct contact with the government now. What was the purpose? Why it was important to abolish intermediaries? To safeguard the interest of the farmers, to save them from the clutches of jamidars, because we already know that jamidars were exploiting the farmers. Second type of land reform is making the tiller the owner. Now what does it mean? The person, the tiller who is actually cultivating that land, he should be made the owner of that land. Why it was important, children? Because if you know that you are the tiller and you are cultivating that farm, but that doesn't belong to you, you will not feel motivated to bring about improvements in the product or raise the productivity of that farm. But so the main purpose was to give incentives to farmers so that they can bring about improvement in productivity. क्योंकि अगर टिलर्स को पता है कि ये लैंड मुझे बिलोंग करता है तभी तो वो हर मीन्स यूज करेंगे टू इंक्रीज दी प्रोडक्टिविटी. Third one is land sealing. This is a very important type of land reform which was introduced. Sealing, when you fix a ceiling means you are determining a maximum limit. So here maximum limit size of land was fixed which could be owned by an individual. So anyone in possession was possessing more than that maximum limit will have to surrender that to government and then government will redistribute it to poor or landless people. Why was it done, students? It was done to reduce concentration of land ownership in few hands. If one person will be allowed to have a very huge piece of land, so obviously the maximum land will be concentrated in few hands only, which was not in the interest of the country. The fourth important land reform was consolidation of holdings. Actually, step had been initiated for the consolidation of holding, students, because a farmer is given one consolidated land holding equal in area to all his split land holdings. What used to happen, as you know, subdivision over the generations takes place. If a farmer is having land, then he will pass it on to his children and then they are more in number, so that land gets divided, and that is called subdivision. Another thing was fragmentation of the holdings. Now what happened? A farmer might be having one whole land holding in some place, some part of the that particular village, or other piece of land at some other part of the village. So in that particular case it was fragmented. So under consolidation of land holdings, what was done was a farmer was given one consolidated land holding. If suppose he is having three small pieces of land in segregated at different parts of the village, then he will be given at one place only three combined consolidated parts of that land holding equal to what he was possessing earlier, but they were separated. So its purpose was to reduce fragmentation, because it will minimize the wastage of land, because you know, suppose there are three pieces of land, he will have to define the boundaries for that area will also get wasted. But now he is given one piece of land equivalent to those three land holdings only, so it will reduce the wastage of land and he will be able to increase the productivity as well. Now let's see, let us assess. हम ये देखें कि लैंड रिफॉर्म्स में क्या प्रॉब्लम्स आई और क्या वो सक्सेसफुल रहे या नहीं रहे. Children, due to abolition of intermediaries, 20 million tenants were brought in direct contact with government. So that way, you know, we were able to save them from the exploitation by jamidars. When we talk about consolidation of land holding, it saw very slow progress. The progress under land sealing had been highly unsatisfactory due to poor enforcement. We are going to talk about this in detail in the next slide. The most notable and successful land reforms, they actually happened in Kerala and West Bengal. And children, no matter how good your policy is, until it is enforced in the right spirit, it is implemented properly, and the governments are committed to this cause, it cannot see the success. And Kerala and West Bengal governments, they were really committed, and that is why they could see these reforms were very successful in these two states. But other states, they had cut a sorry figure due to lack of commitment. Now, what were the causes of failure of land reform? So, particularly now what happened, land sealing was a very beautiful land reform, but it did not see that success except Kerala and West Bengal. The reason was Jamidars, they took undue advantage of the loopholes in the policy. So, they were just trying to look for loopholes where they can safeguard themselves and not hand over the land to the government. What they did was they evicted tenants and started cultivating their own lands to avoid transfer of land. See, they were already aware that government has already introduced this land reform called making the tiller the owner of land. तो अब उन्होंने क्या किया, जो भी tenants उनके लिए काम करते थे उनको evict कर दिया, उनको निकाल दिया और अपने land को खुद ही cultivate करने लग गए. So they very smartly they acted so that they don't have to transfer their land to other. They themselves claim to be the tillers of their own land. Undue delay in implementation of the policy. Now, what other thing Jamidars did? They challenged this legislation. Now, when you challenge it, it goes into court of law. Until it is settled, it cannot be implemented. So, this gave Jamidars a time. Now, how did they utilize this time? Because that is what they wanted, malified transfer of land. So, what they did was, rather than handing over the excess land to government, what they did, since as I told you, they started cultivating their own lands, they evicted the tenants. Another thing they did was, they started registering their lands in the name of their kiths and kins, that means their close relations. Now, obviously, that means they will not hand it over to the third person. The mid 1960s saw a drastic change in approach, and now we are going to talk about the new agriculture strategy, wherein we are talking about green revolution. Now, this resulted in direct interventions to bring about improvement in productivity of agriculture sector. What is green revolution, children? This refers to the large increase in production of food grains resulting from the use of high yielding variety HYV seeds, especially for wheat and rice. But what was the need for green revolution? Children, about 75% of the country's population was dependent upon agriculture. So this sector, which was facing stagnation on the eve of independence as well, had to be made, more productive because of the dependency of such a large percentage of country's population. Another thing was absence of required infrastructure was there. Therefore, some direct intervention was needed in the form of adoption of new technology, adoption of modern means of production. And even now our farmers were dependent on monsoon. So, even now when they say, the Indian agriculture is the gamble of monsoon. यानी हमारे यहाँ अच्छी crop किस चीज़ पे dependent होती है actually? Good monsoon पे. But I would like to highlight that Green Revolution was actually a package program. That means it was not just limited to using HYV seeds. The use of HYV seeds required the use of fertilizers, pesticides in correct quantity, as well as regular supply of water. So, if lack of irrigation facilities is there, but you are able to buy HYV seeds, but you don't have fertilizer and you don't have pesticides and you don't even have correct information as to what quantity these are going to be used and what time they are going to be used, then you are not going to reap the result. Now, application of these inputs in correct proportion was very vital. the farmers who could benefit. So it is quite natural, students, since it's a package program. So adopting this technology would means the farmer must have money also. So the farmers who basically could benefit initially from HYV seeds required reliable irrigation facilities as well as financial resources to purchase fertilizer. Now, as a result, in the first phase, that means mid 1960s to mid 1970s, what happened? The use of HYV seeds was restricted to more affluent states like Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, and Tamil Nadu. Children, the thing is, it was a very new technology, and poor farmer who had to put, already he was having limited money, limited resources. Now, if he would like to buy HYV seeds, then he knows that he has to arrange for irrigation facilities on a regular basis. He will have to buy fertilizer, he will have to buy pesticides also. So it was in a way too much of risk for him, because if he doesn't succeed, that means he would lose everything that he had. Another important thing to note is that only wheat growing regions benefited, because children, in the first phase it was mainly wheat production which recorded a very high increase. Now, in the second phase of Green Revolution, that is mid 1970s to mid 1980s, the HYV technology spread to a larger number of states and benefit more variety of crop, because it is natural. For 1 decade already this technology now has come into use, and farmers could realize that there is significant increase in production that they can witness if they are, so their willingness also came, and government also, we are going to talk about that, government also took initiatives to make farmers adopt this technology. And what was the impact? So there was very high increase in the production of food grains especially. So spread of Green Revolution technology enabled India to achieve self-sufficiency in food grain. This is the biggest advantage that we had, children, the biggest positive impact of Green Revolution. Why? Because there was increase in marketed surplus. And this is very important. Now, what is marketed surplus? That portion of the production which is brought to the market for sale. देखिए ये बहुत ज़रूरी है. सपोज अगर प्रोडक्शन इंक्रीज हुआ, लेकिन वो उस प्रोडक्शन में से अपने फार्मर्स ने सेल्फ कंजम्पशन के लिए यूज़ किया, लेकिन मार्केट में बेचने के लिए जो प्रोडक्शन है वो बहुत कम बचा, तो उससे फ़ायदा नहीं होगा. लेकिन अगर मार्केट में बेचने वाले प्रोडक्शन का शेयर भी बढ़ेगा, तब फार्मर उसको बेच के इनकम अर्न कर सकता है. And one good thing about Green Revolution in India was that there was huge increase in marketed surplus. Another important thing to note is, and very good impact was, the price of food grains declined relative to other items. Why? क्योंकि अब सप्लाई बढ़ जाएगी फूड ग्रेन्स की, और पहले क्या हो रहा था, शॉर्टेज हो रहा था, कमर्शलाइजेशन ऑफ एग्रीकल्चर की वजह से जो फूड आइटम्स है, फूड ग्रेन का प्रोडक्शन है, वो भी रिड्यूस हो गया था. लेकिन अब ग्रीन रेवोल्यूशन की वजह से व्हेन देयर वाज ड्रास्टिक इंक्रीज इन प्रोडक्शन स्पेशली ऑफ फूड ग्रेन्स, तो उनकी सप्लाई मार्केट में बढ़ जाएगी, सो प्राइसेस विल कम डाउन. सो लोअर इनकम ग्रुप विल ऑल्सो बेनिफिट, क्योंकि अब वो कम प्राइस पे भी दे विल बी एबल टू बाय दैट. Another important aspect was government was able to maintain buffer stock. Children, ये जो buffer stock है, क्योंकि government used to buy produce from the farmers and maintain it with FCI, and that maintenance of buffer stock was very important. अब आज के टाइम पे भी आप देख सकते हैं, कोविड-19 वाली सिचुएशन में भी, या कोई भी नेचुरल कैलामिटी होती है या मिस हैपनिंग होती है, ऐसे केसेस में गवर्नमेंट एक्चुअली प्रोवाइड्स और मेक्स द सप्लाई अवेलेबल थ्रू इट्स बफर स्टॉक्स ओनली. Now children, since we have already talked about what is green revolution, how did it benefit farmer, it's important to see that there were two types of risks which were involved in this particular technology. First one was the possibility that it would increase the disparities between small and big farmers. Why so? जैसे मैंने आपको बताया that already this was a package program. Package program का मतलब क्या हुआ? खाली seeds खरीदने से काम नहीं चलेगा. आपको seeds के साथ fertilizer भी चाहिए, रेगुलर इरीगेशन फैसिलिटीज़ भी आपको प्रोवाइड करनी पड़ेंगी, अरेंज करनी पड़ेंगी, पेस्टिसाइड्स का यूज़ भी आपको करना पड़ेगा. एंड इफ़ यू आर नॉट एबल, एंड हु विल बी एबल टू हैव दैट? the farmer who's already rich and who's already having financial resources. लेकिन जो already poor farmer है उसके पास तो वैसे ही means नहीं थे inputs खरीदने के लिए, तो अब उसको HYV seeds के साथ साथ बाकी inputs भी खरीदना, it was very difficult for him, quite impossible. इसीलिए एक बहुत बड़ा risk इस new technology के साथ जो attached था वो क्या था, that disparity, the gap between rich and small and big farmers will widen. Second risk was that, children, if you are making use of HYV seeds, the crops which are grown using HYV seeds, they are more prone to attack by pest. इसका मतलब आपने सब inputs use किए, but finally you can lose your crop due to crop failure if there is pest attack. उसको avoid करने के लिए इस technology में pesticide use करना बहुत ज़रूरी था. लेकिन since government had taken steps and initiatives, तो ये risk जो थे वो materialize नहीं हुए. So government made sure that loans at a low, very low rate of interest were provided to small farmers. Government had also ensured that subsidized fertilizers are also provided to the farmers so that they can afford to buy it and use it and adopt the new technology. The risk of small farmers being ruined when pest attacks their crop was considerably reduced by the services rendered by research institutes. देखिए गवर्नमेंट के एग्रीकल्चर रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट हैं और उस रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट्स के थ्रू डिससेमिनेशन ऑफ इंफॉर्मेशन वाज आल्सो पास्ड ऑन टू, क्योंकि इंफॉर्मेशन इन दिस पैकेज प्रोग्राम प्लेड अनदर वेरी क्रूशियल रोल चिल्ड्रन, क्योंकि कितने समय में कितनी क्वांटिटी में कब पेस्टिसाइड यूज़ करना है, कब फर्टिलाइजर्स यूज़ करने, ये सारी इंफॉर्मेशन जो है रिसर्च इंस्टीट्यूट्स ने फार्मर्स को प्रोवाइड की. Okay, with this we come to an end of this topic, and in the next video would conclude this chapter. Thank you.